What's good, everybody? I hope everybody's well and making their dreams come true, making it do what it do, right? So we're going to jump right into it here. I am your man, Dr. L. Now, usually I focus on criminal justice, but we got some crazy stuff going on. First we had the conflict over in Russia, excuse me, in the uh, Ukraine versus Russia. And now we got this potential conflict coming up that the U.S. is spending money on. In both cases, spending money raising the standard of living for its Americans instead of focusing on education, instead of focusing on lowering the cost of education, particularly higher education, instead of doing everything that Americans want us to do, healthcare, fixing the food. What are we doing? Engaging in another proxy war, if not war altogether. Absolutely crazy how we're not learning the lessons of history. Absolutely crazy how we're not learning the lessons of history. So I'm going to play a couple of videos here. If you have not seen this video by Tucker Carlson, in this video that I'm about to play, the full version of it has just now been released. So we're going to play this right here, and here we go. Just absolutely crazy.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
How many people live in Iran?
92 million.
Okay. Yeah,
How could you not know that?
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who claims
about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country. You're the one who claims they're not trying to murder Donald Trump. You're the one who can't figure out if it's a good idea to kill General Soleimani.
You don't believe they're trying to murder Trump?
Yes, I do.
Because you're not calling for military strikes against them in retaliation. If you really believe that.
We're carrying out military strikes today.
You said Israel was.
Right, with our help. I said we. Israel is leading them, but we're supporting them.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
It's just absolutely disgusting. Now, this is just one clip. There's two. Tucker Carlson released these two clips to, I guess, his friends, and I watched Judge Napolitano. I hope I'm saying his name right. The judge. I watched a couple other people, neutrality studies, and a couple other persons who deal with foreign affairs. It's kind of a hobby of mine to really read that stuff and watch it. And I'm really just disgusted by this particular. He doesn't know the population, he doesn't know the ethnic makeup of it. So the full version of that has just been released. You can go to Tucker Carlson, his YouTube page, and watch that. And so I wanted to play next. There's so many different videos I could play on here. Let's go to what Americans think about this, and let's go to present share screen. Breaking news. This is breaking news. Breaking news: voters' attitudes on Iran, Trump's economy, and LA protests revealed in new poll. Now, all of this was taken prior to the actual bombings that went off, so we don't really have. And this video that I'm playing right here is released within 2 days of our own video. So we don't have current numbers. At least I don't have current numbers about what Americans feel about entering the war. So we'll play a little bit of this. This comes from Forbes. Forbes is probably part of the problem, in all honesty, part of the machine that is trying to gear up for war. Probably.
You have some new numbers from a Harris X Harvard start from the top approval rating. Where does that sit right now, just a few months into his second term?
Well, the president has had a pretty eventful month, and his approval rating is largely steady with what we saw in May. However, it is trending down, and it has been trending down since really he announced the tariffs in early April. So
it's been trending down since tariffs. I can't understand how anybody really has any type of support for this man. His beef with Elon Musk, his tariffs, his waffling on this conflict that's going on in the Middle East, his inability to get anything done with Ukraine. I'm gonna stop this within 24 hours and pick up a phone call. They're still enraging on since this man has been in office since January.
The president started a 52% approval rating in February. It largely held in March. Then it fell fairly significantly in April, and now he's at 46%. So things are steady, but with a slight downwards trend. And it's yet to be seen whether or not the president will break this downward trend in the next month or two as he nears the 6 months in office mark and really reclaim 50% approval or higher as he had in the beginning, or whether all of a sudden we'll wake up and we'll find him at 40% approval or around 40% approval. So I think a lot of things are in play right now, and the public is in a cautious wait and see attitude when it comes to Trump, his policies, but also the way that Democrats are countering Trump.
We've been in wait and see for a few months now when it comes to these tariffs. So because you're seeing this downward spiral, does it seem like people are still waiting and seeing, but approving him a little bit less? And how does that really, historically, what does that really mean?
What is waiting and seeing what? The man is incompetent. We knew from this first administration, all the people who left, all the people that said that he, didn't read the intelligence briefings or wasn't paying attention. We knew it. Why would you vote this man? I can't believe they voted this man in January 6th. Voting. Oh my God, just absolute nuttiness. And again, this breaking news, voters' attitudes on Iran.
For Trump, has he seen this before?
Well, by historical standards, he's doing fine compared to himself in the first term, but also other presidents within the first 6 months of their time.
I can't believe that any of that. I can't believe that he's continuing to do fine. I mean, the waffling on the tariffs, people are losing their jobs. You fired a bunch of employees, let them go, and now you want to wage war against Iran. You did all this to cut and to save money, the elimination of DEI, the elimination of some Jobs Corps programs or Jobs Corps in and of itself.
Time in office. The political reality tends to slap you in the face pretty hard and pretty quickly when you are the commander in chief and you're running the country. But I will read for the audience in terms of how he's doing in different areas and what the approval ratings are. So the highest approval rating that Trump carries is on immigration. In May, he was at 51%. Today, he's at 49%.
Immigration, these ICE raids that are going on. Oh my God, 51 and now 49%. Who's rating this man? I'm surprised it's so high, if we even can believe these polls.
He's had a high of 56% on immigration. Generally, the public approves of the goals of his immigration policies, even though, as we'll talk in a minute, sometimes they, have reservation in terms of how they're approached.
That's going to turn on him too. They're going to turn on him. Nobody. I mean, we want you to get, to deal with this immigration problem. Well, we certainly don't want you to commit to create more immigrants, more migrants, more persons fleeing their countries because you're bombing them. It seems to me that one of the best ways to keep this immigrant problem under control and at bay is to stop creating more immigrants.
See this at play when we'll talk about the riots in Los Angeles. In a similar fashion, returning Americas to its values, 48% of voters approve of Trump's job in that regard, and he's garnered a high of 53% at the beginning of his term. And administering the government, reducing the cost of government, he's at 46%, more or less. Foreign affairs, 45%. Where he's getting low marks is
where he's getting low marks. These 40 and 50% marks aren't low to him. This is what I'm saying. Forbes might be part of the problem. Maybe a little bit of spin doctoring going on here.
Is tariffs and trade, 41%, and handling inflation, 42%. And especially the inflation, the approval on handling inflation and the inflation issue is very important for Trump, because this is one of the reasons why he was elected, and this is one of the reasons why the Democrats came crashing down before the presidential election, the inability to move the public on concerns around inflation. So there's a very wide range, as you would expect with Trump. Slight downward trends across the board, but that's just government, right? And it happens to all presidents.
I want to talk, before we get into all the issues, I want to talk about one specific issue between two people, the world's richest billionaire as well as the world's most powerful leader. Yes, I'm talking about the fight between Donald Trump and Elon Musk.
I'm not going to get into that. So that's that. So again, this is from Forbes. Let me try to see if I can find something that is a little more relevant here that's going to deal with particularly the subject for today. So do America. All right. So we got the Washington Post here, and this is we asked 1,000 Americans if they support U.S. strikes on Iran. Supposedly this is random sampling here. What do Americans think about the possibility of launching U.S. airstrikes against Iran, which President Donald Trump threatened this week, unless the country dismantles its nuclear program? The Washington Post texted more than 1,000 people on Wednesday to ask. The poll finds Americans opposing U.S. strikes. The poll finds Americans opposing U.S. strikes against Iran by 20 percentage points, 45 to 25, with a sizable 30% saying they are unsure. I find that hard to believe. So 45% oppose, 25% support, 30% are unsure. Really, what are you unsure about? So let's see. Republicans, 47% say that, yeah, let's go for it. Democrats say 9. No, we're not doing it. Independents, 20%. Military veterans, 30%, 37%, but that's almost equal. They're not military household. Yeah, this is crazy, man. This is crazy. How much have you heard about Israel launching airstrikes against Iran's nuclear program and Iran retaliating? Heard a great deal. I heard a good amount. So this is roughly 70%. 70% know what's going on. 30% don't. Support for U.S. airstrikes, good deal. It's a good amount, little or nothing. Support. So those who know a great deal about the conflict say a great deal, and that's surprising. Wow. How serious a threat do you think Iran's nuclear program poses to the U.S.? An immediate and serious threat, 22%. A somewhat serious threat to the U.S. Wow, this is really, really surprising. How serious a threat do you think Iran's nuclear program poses to the U.S.? 48%. A minor threat, not a threat. Wow, this is crazy. Republicans are more likely to say Iran's nuclear program is immediate and serious than Democrats or independents, but a plurality of Republicans say it's somewhat serious. Man, this is really shocking. This is why you got to read different stuff, because my algorithms on YouTube, everything comes up as Americans don't want this. Americans don't want this. So how concerned, if at all, are you about the possibility of the U.S. getting involved in a full-scale war with Iran? How concerned? Somewhat very. More than half of Democrats say they're very concerned. So everybody's concerned about it. All right. So concerned, but we should do it anyway, right? How serious? How much have you heard? This is about heard. What was the question about how much of a problem that it poses? How serious is the threat you think are serious? They think it's a serious threat. 48% think it's a serious threat. Wow, I'm really shocked at that. I really am. I was not expecting that. But that's why you got to look at different stuff. All right. So we're going to go back to Forbes here, and we're going to go to Senator Tim Kaine, former vice presidential candidate, who's going to talk about what I think has not been talked about enough, in all honesty, and that is who can declare war? We have all these military actions, we have all this different stuff that's going on here, and the president, I read a lot of information, about the wars, the interactions, the peacekeeping missions, the situations, the fights, the engagements, security assessments that the U.S. has done since 1945, since the end of the Second World War, and the interventions that we have just been involved in since that time has just been crazy, and all of it has been done without congressional approval, um, or voting for this type of stuff. And then Tim Kaine is going to take us through the War Powers Act and how that was established and all this. So I think it's very good to watch this and just get a sense of what's going on here, and how we as a country can try to take our country back from the precipice of madness. So again, if we go to a full-scale war with Iran, what is China and Russia have some type of security pacts with these people, right? And Iran is part of the BRICS. If you're not familiar with the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, creating a global system, or a competitive system, I should say, to the financial markets and financial hegemony and dominance of the United States dollar. So in other words, these countries are tired of being sanctioned, tired of the manipulation of currency and markets. And if Wall Street crashes or if London crashes, then it crashes the whole world economy. So these countries that started off with those five are now, they started off with five and a couple of observer nations. Now there's somewhere around 30 to 40 nations between full members and observers. So in a lot of Western countries too, a lot of South American countries are going over to this, dumping the dollar and all that. So let's go over and watch somebody who's more knowledgeable than that than I. But this is a serious problem. And so if you're going to attack one of these member nation states of this BRICS program that is trying to establish something different, then how are the other nations going to respond? Because that's going to hurt their financial progress. That's going to hurt their financial standing, and all that. And how should nations respond when and if a member nation who is dealing with this, who is involved financially, how should they respond? How would you respond? How would the U.S. respond, right? When your financial ally, or someone whose market you depend on, who's going to help to prop up your own investment in currency and financial status and economics and all that, how would we respond? So let's listen to Senator Tim Kaine. Again, this is from Forbes, but this is Senator Tim Kaine as he is explaining the War Powers Act and what we should do, and how come Congress isn't doing more. And it's really disappointing to me that Congress isn't doing more to stop these types of individuals. You're just shipping our boys off over there. You sent warplanes over there. You're moving aircraft carriers and strike groups over into harm's way. And then if Iran strikes these individuals, then it's going to be an issue. Then we're going to be, everybody's going to be outraged. Oh my God, he strike us. How dare you strike the U.S.?
Mr. President, I laid out with a few folks on the floor to talk about the most serious issue we've ever talked about on the floor of the United States, the prospect that America may soon be in a war. There's no part of the Constitution that's more important than the Article 1 provisions making plain that the United States should not be at war without a vote of Congress. And yet the news of the day suggests that we are potentially on the verge of a war with Iran. When I was elected to the Senate in 2012, having served as a governor from 2006 to 2010 during a tremendous upsurge in the two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I visited our troops multiple times in the Green Zone in Baghdad and in Afghanistan. I went to the deployments and homecomings. I went to the wakes and funerals. And I told myself when I came to the Senate that if I ever had the chance to stop this nation from getting into an unnecessary war, I would do everything I could to stop us from getting into an unnecessary war. I happen to believe that the United States engaging in a war against Iran, a third war in the Middle East since 2001, would be a catastrophic blunder for this country. I think there are some in this body who have a different point of view than me on that point, but I think we should all be able to agree that the fundamental constitutional principle that says we shouldn't be in a war, if Congress doesn't have the guts to debate it and vote on it, we should all, having taken an oath to the Constitution, at least support the principle that war is something that should be for Congress to declare. Mr. President, just recently, right before I walked to the floor, the New York Times published this article, and I'm just going to read this to demonstrate the imminence of the threat that this country faces. The article, New York Times, dated today: Iran is preparing missiles for possible retaliatory strikes on U.S. bases, officials say. I'll just read the first few paragraphs. Iran has prepared missiles and other military equipment for strikes on U.S. bases in the Middle East should the United States join Israel's war against the country, according to American officials who have reviewed intelligence reports. Fears of a wider war are growing among American officials as Israel presses the White House to intervene in its conflict with Iran. If the United States joins the Israeli campaign and strikes Fordo, a key Iranian nuclear facility, the Iranian-backed Houthi militia will almost certainly resume striking ships in the Red Sea. The official said. They added that pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria would probably try to attack U.S. bases there. Other officials said that in the event of an attack, Iran would begin to mine the Straits of Hormuz, attacking them to pin American warships in the Persian Gulf. Commanders put American troops on high alert at military bases throughout the region, including in the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. The United States has more than 40,000 troops deployed in the Middle East. I met the father of an Apache helicopter pilot currently deployed in Syria yesterday. Finally, from the article, 2 Iranian officials have acknowledged that the country would attack U.S. bases in the Middle East, starting with those in Iraq, if the United States joins Israel's war. We stand tonight as close to the potential initiation of a third war in the Middle East, United States against Iran, as we have been during my time in the Senate. And so yesterday morning, when the Senate came into session, I announced, and then I followed up with the filing of a war powers resolution in this body, a privileged resolution that by my clock will mature and be subject to a vote on this floor because of its privileged status on a week from Thursday. 10 days from the filing of such a motion, even by a single senator.
So this is 10 days they got to get this thing done or vote on it, or get together, talk about it, vote on it. And this was June 12th, and it's June 19th as I record this. So a couple more days, and they got to talk about this, right? So hopefully the president doesn't launch any strikes in the meantime while he's waiting for this. But of course, the man, he's going to do what he's going to do, right? Because he was in the middle of negotiations and then struck or allowed to be struck the negotiator and the Iranian people, the Iranian country, and the chief negotiator was killed along with some other generals. As the senator here is speaking about, our troops in harm's way, in the possibility of our aircraft, aircraft carriers being struck, also dealing with the troops being in harm's way, those who are military bases. Just for kicks, I read a book called "Losing Military Supremacy" by Andrei Molchanov, presumably a Russian. And I want to read that because I want to understand, a little bit more about Russia's ideology. So I read that book. Again, I watch a lot of experts who are far more knowledgeable than I. So that was a book that was recommended in one of the podcasts that I was watching. And so I read it. And, we think that we have this military superiority in Trump's tweets and we got the most dangerous killing machine and all this other stuff. That's been proven not to be the case, right? The Israelis are certainly in an issue with their Iron Dome failing, or at least being exhausted. Ukrainian issues that are going on there. This is a problem. We think that we have this military dominance, and Russia has done a lot. These countries, Russia and China, have done a lot to catch up, and even Iran have done a lot to catch up to the U.S. militarily with their chips, with their microchips, and etc. So we think that we're one of these countries. Tim Kaine here.
The Senate is required to take this matter up for an up or down floor vote about whether or not war should happen without a vote of Congress. A little bit about the Constitution. Many in here have heard me speak about this over the years, but about the Constitution. The framers of the Constitution grappled with the question of how war should begin, and they grappled with the question in a most unusual way. In the Constitution of 1787, the Article 1 power is the legislative power, and the Article 2 power is the executive power. And the framers of the Constitution split war powers into a legislative responsibility and an executive responsibility. The legislative responsibility is clear. Congress declares war. It's in Article 1. The executive responsibility is to be the commander-in-chief. Once Congress, 535 people have declared war, you don't need 535 commanders-in-chief. That would lead to chaos. So a war, once declared by a debate and vote by the people's elected body, then gets handed to a president who, as commander-in-chief, is responsible for executing on that declaration. Now, the framers of the Constitution did understand one thing about the president's power, which is the president as commander-in-chief should defend the nation. The president always has the ability to defend the United States without asking Congress's permission. Back in 1787, Congress might adjourn and write horseback back to Vermont. What if the United States was attacked? You couldn't wait for all of Congress to come back to enable the United States to defend itself. And so a president has the inherent power under Article 2 to defend the United States without asking for permission. But it's been the understanding since the very beginning of this republic that if it's more than defending the United States, if it's going on offense in any way, congressional authorization is needed. It's so rare. In other countries and in other times, war has been for the executive. It's been for the king. It's been for the emperor. It's been for the monarch. It's been for the czar. It's been for the sultan. But in the United States, we made a very careful choice to do it differently. And that choice was described most eloquently in a letter from the main drafter of the Constitution, James Madison, to President Thomas Jefferson. Actually, he was not yet president. This letter was dated April 2, 1798. And James Madison described what were they getting at when they vested the power to declare war with Congress. And here's what James Madison wrote. Our Constitution supposes what the history of all governments demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. Our Constitution has accordingly, with studied care, vested the question of war with the legislature. Other countries don't do this. But the framers of our Constitution in 1787 decided we're going to be different. Before we send troops in a harm's way, where they could be killed, where they could be injured, where they could see people that they love, their colleagues killed and injured, before we're going to send troops in harm's way in war, we want to see the people's elected bodies, both houses, have a debate about what the stakes are and whether we should force our troops into harm's way, potentially lose their lives. And that debate will be in full view of the American public. So the American public can understand what's at stake, and then they can call their representatives or write them a letter and tell them what they think about whether war is necessary and whether the sacrifice we ask of our troops should be the ultimate sacrifice that we are often asking of them in war. And that's been the Constitution since 1787. The Constitution's been amended probably in the 25 or 26 amendments now. That has never been amended. That has never been amended. In 1974, Congress grappled with a challenging problem and passed the War Powers Resolution in 1974. What was the problem? The problem in 1974 was this. A president began war without telling Congress. 1974, we were in the midst of the Vietnam War, and Congress did know that, and Congress had passed some legislation, at least appropriating funds for it and somewhat authorizing it during the Johnson administration. But President Nixon, Congress knew about the war in Vietnam. Obviously, there was a draft. 56,000 Americans were killed in that war. But President Nixon, without informing Congress, extended the war and started bombing Cambodia. It was called the secret bombing of Cambodia, a new country that had not been covered by war authorizations. And so Congress stepped up and acted and passed the War Powers Resolution in 1974. And that resolution, Mr. President, did a number of things. It established some protocols for when the president initiates military action, providing notice to Congress so that there can't be a secret war, giving Congress some ability, once notice is provided, to try to withdraw notice if it thinks that the war is ill-advised. But the War Powers Resolution also did something else. It gave the power to even one member of Congress, one senator or one House member, if a president initiates war or is on the verge of initiating war. The War Powers Resolution gave to one senator or one congressman the ability to file a resolution to stop a war before it starts or to stop a war once started. And the War Powers Resolution over time has made that a privilege motion, meaning it can bypass committee and be brought up on the floor of the Senate for a vote within an expeditious period of time. A privilege motion is one that sort of elbows everything else out of the way because Congress has judged that the matter is so important that it should take precedence over normal committee proceeding, and it should be considered in a prompt fashion. It's a simple majority vote. Closure. And it has to be debated on the full amended. The criteria in Resolution 74, you were entitled are to one, the United States, and other be the case. You can't just say I want to stop a war that no one to show that there is no existing congressional authorization authorizing the United States to be at war in this case with Iran. That second criteria has been met. We had a similar resolution on the floor a few years ago following the U.S. strike that killed the Iranian military leader Soleimani and the ruling of the parliamentarian and really the acknowledgement of the body was that there is no current congressional authorization standard met, and I would argue that it clearly is. The U.S. is already using U.S. weaponry to knock down Iranian missiles. That's more than imminence. That's actual kinetic hostility. The United States is being urged to enter the war. The United States is in the war. We have plans to go after 40,000 U.S. troops. Congress clearly wanted to file such a motion to be heard before a war begins. I believe the imminence standard is clearly met in this case with actual kinetic activity between U.S. weaponry and Iranians. And so over the course of the next few days, you'll likely hear me talk more than once about the need for Congress to stand up and say there shall not be a war against Iran without a congressional vote. Pretty simple proposition. No U.S. war against Iran without a congressional vote. And Mr. President, let me answer a couple of questions that colleagues of mine have asked about the resolution that I filed yesterday. First, what about self-defense? What about if Iran does take action against the United States, the homeland, or a U.S. base in the Middle East, or a U.S. consulate in Erbil in the Kurdish area of Iraq? What if Iran takes action against the U.S.? The answer is pretty straightforward. Under the Constitution, the president can defend the United States, and the president doesn't need Congress to do that. So if there is Iranian attack on the United States, the president can and has said he will, and I would strongly support him, as I know everyone in this body would, to defend U.S. interests against Iranian attack. So the self-defense question is,
and that's why they're placing I can't say why, but it's a sneaky suspicion that this is why so many troops and aircraft carriers are already in quote unquote harm's way, because if something happens, you got to respond, right?
is mentioned in the resolution. The resolution says nothing in this resolution will block the ability of the U.S. to take legal action to defend itself, and that is clearly contemplated by Article 2. The second question that I'm asking is, what about the U.S. helping Israel defend itself? Mr. President, I've been here since January 2013. I have voted for every Israel defense package that's ever been before this body, and there have been many. Israel receives more defense aid from the United States than any other nation, year after year after year, with my support. And I've done more than vote for Israel defense aid. On a couple of instances, I've whipped votes to make sure that we found enough aid for Israel. In April of last year, we passed a supplemental bill in this body that had billions of dollars of aid for Israel in the aftermath of the horrific attacks on Israel by Hamas on October 7. And it was shortly after that vote that Iran launched a set of attacks against Israel. And the defense aid that the U.S. provided enabled us to knock down and assist Israel in knocking down Iranian drones and missiles. That was a good thing. Had those drones and missiles landed in Israel, they would have not only killed and wounded tons of civilians, but they would have led to escalation in the region that would have been unhelpful for all countries in the region. So I stand strong for Israel's right to defend itself. And I stand strong for the United States in providing Israel support so that they can defend itself. But that's a different question. That's a different question than whether the U.S. should go to war with Iran. In my view, there is no compelling security reason for the U.S. to go to war with Iran. And the last question that I want to ask and sort of reflect upon, Mr. President, before concluding, is this: what about diplomacy? What about diplomacy?
I'm going to leave it out there so you guys can go over and watch the rest of that. So he's got also what I lastly want to talk about is how some of his ardent one-time supporters have now kind of turned their back on Trump and his administration and his decision to place us in this situation. And this comes from Breaking Points. And this is a comedian, actor, or comedian podcaster, I guess, Dave Smith. I never heard of him, but I did watch this. So this is Warhawk's call for regime change in Iran, and this is called Dave Smith impeach Trump over war with Iran. So we're going to pick it up from about 3/4 of the way through, and here we go.
Them working on ousting them the entire time, and they've still stayed in power. So you could tell me a nice story. It's easy to write down a nice story. Oh yeah, I say we intervene, and then we put the sun back in, and then everything works out fine. Okay, let's see that happen. And the other thing that I'll add, and I don't know, maybe things have changed to some degree. Certainly Israel was able to pull off that drone attack, which I don't think they would have been able to pull off in years past. But it was in 2007 that the Pentagon told George W. Bush that we cannot go to war with Iran because we do not have escalation dominance against them. Essentially meaning that they can hit all of our bases and embassies in the region, and we are very vulnerable to them. And we've already seen demonstrated since the Israeli attack that the Iranian the missiles that they sent last year toward Israel, as many of us guessed, that wasn't really their best. They were intentionally making an attack that wouldn't really hurt anybody, that wouldn't really lead to a war, which Iran has done over and over again. But now we push them to the point where they probably don't feel that they have the option not to respond. Donald Trump telling them to come back to the negotiating table now is a joke. Yeah. I mean, what an impotent leader to be sitting there talking about coming back to the negotiating table. It's like sitting after Pearl Harbor and telling FDR, now's the time to go negotiate with the Japanese. Right. Negotiations are over now. The time for negotiations was before this. And so, yeah, Donald Trump, listen, man, I supported him this last year. I apologize for doing so. It was a bad calculation. At the time, it seemed like the right one. But he should be impeached and removed for this one. And not on some not on some ridiculous Nancy Pelosi. Of course, the Congress will never do it because they're all a bunch of corrupt hacks.
This is the one thing they support. This is like yeah.
Donald Trump should be impeached and removed for this. All of his supporters should turn on him. It's the absolute betrayal of everything that he ran and campaigned on and everything that he stood for. And I will say, despite the fact that Donald Trump supporters have been labeled like a cult following, and that certainly is true for a percentage of his supporters, he is going to lose his coalition over this. I know I don't just speak for myself when I say there are a lot of us who simply will not go along with this. So it's just a devastating mistake. By the way, on top of that, he's also going to lose the deportation fight because of this. Because right now he needed all the political capital he could have to turn that. You got a majority support for deportations, but the minority is very mobilized and they're out and they're protesting all around the country. He needed all of his political capital for that move. So here's what we got: the neocons win. More war abroad, and bomb the world and invite the world. No matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain.
It is fun.
All right, I'm gonna leave it out there. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions. You can go over to Breaking Points, check out the rest of that video. I just found this channel, so I thought they were pretty good. So listen, I mean, let me know your thoughts, your opinions. Hit me in the comment section. Do you think we should place our troops in harm's way, subject them to possible false flags attacks, subject them to bombings by Israel? Should we bomb them? Should we put troops on the ground, boots on the ground? What are your thoughts and your opinions about this? Do you agree with where do you stand with the poll that I read from the Washington Post about do you think that the Iranians pose an existential threat to the United States? And should we go to war with that? Are you willing to risk our sons and our daughters and more money, more billions of dollars, given our financial situation, given our rising gas prices, given our rising food prices, et cetera, right? And how much is gas going to go up if they go to war? So are you willing to risk all that and the possibility of other nations becoming involved, Russia, China, and entering into a world war. Thoughts and opinions, heavy in the comment section.